Hello there and welcome to a new episode of the Studio Project. My name is Wim Winters and as announced in the last video, Philip Newell came over to Belgium to our house, stayed here for a few days, had long conversations and obviously he had a look on the barn next door where we hopefully can construct our own little island, our own professional recording studio. For those of you who are new to the show, to this channel or to this series of vlogs, just in a few words, I, together with my wife, Anja, am thinking about building this studio here next door. And since I'm playing music, classical music, keyboard music, thinking also on creating our own label, making in the first place analog recordings, producing vinyl, master tape copies, and that kind of thing. By myself, by others, and maybe releases of older recordings. So in order to do that, we contacted Philip, who is a legendary sound engineer. We worked in the 70s at Pi Records, later at Virgin Records, end of the 70s, early 80s. He made legendary recordings. He was on tour with people like Mike Oldfield and Queen. He recorded the famous recording of Bernstein in Ely Cathedral of Mahler too, and other classical recordings. So he has a lot of experience. And Philip is working since mid-80 actually as one of the leading personalities actually as well, in the field of building and designing professional recording studios. So Anja and myself, we went to Vigo in Spain mid of May to meet him for the first time. We had long conversations, we visited some studios. And as I said in the introduction, Philip came to Belgium. He was visiting family in England, and so things could be combined. So he stayed here for 3 days, and just before we went back to Brussels to bring him to his airplane back to Vigo, we had an interview. Okay, Philip, thank you for accepting this invitation for this small interview with you. We have been here in our house for 2 days. You visiting our barn and some other spots where we eventually could think on making a studio. And so thank you very much for coming, and it's wonderful to hear from you actually what the reason is, or what the reason could be, or what the reasons could be for a musician like myself wanting to have or to record in a studio and not in another room. Since we are classical musicians, we are kind of used to play in other rooms, but a studio has clear advantages. And so, what's your opinion about this?
When we were recording the day before yesterday, just making some trial recordings to see which microphone positions gave the best sound or the most natural sound from the clavichord, it was obvious that once we'd recorded the sound, we needed to listen back to it to see what the character of the sound was. But it was very difficult to do it in the same room, because if we listened on headphones, the sensation is not the same as through loudspeakers. And if we listened through loudspeakers, we were playing the loudspeakers back in the same room where we were making the recording. So we didn't know if some of the sound of the room was on the reproduction via the loudspeakers or on the original recording. We couldn't separate the two. So if we have a control room that is separate with very neutral acoustics that do not colour the sound, the recording itself can be monitored through the loudspeakers in the control room, and it's very easy to hear what the characteristic is of the instrument and what the characteristic of the room is.
Yeah.
So if we're moving the microphone away from the instrument to try to get the most appropriate balance of the sound that we want, and between the strings and soundboards and the room, if you need to get to a position where the instrument sounds best, but you're at a point where you're capturing more of the room than you want to, then you have to make a compromise. So perhaps the position where you've got the best balance between the room and the instrument, you're not getting the right timbre from the instrument. And if in the position where you're getting the right tonal quality for the instrument, you're either getting too much or too little of the room.
Yes.
So in a recording studio where the main recording, the performing room, has a more neutral sound, it gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to find the points for the microphone, the positions for the microphone, where the tonal character of the instrument is the way that you're hoping it to be, or you're expecting it to be.
That's true, and it was a remarkable experiment. And we talk about the control room in a minute. What you often hear, and what's actually true as well, is that an acoustical instrument, can benefit from a room because it gets its color through the room. Every instrument sounds different in another room, which is kind of pleasant. But isn't there a risk in a neutral room? And I know you can make a variable acoustics with adding wood paneling and so on, but isn't there a risk in a neutral room that an acoustical instrument, feels a little bit isolated, like being in a desert, an acoustical desert?
Well, everything about recording is a compromise. As we were just saying, you would have to compromise, if you're recording in this room, between the positions of the microphones that gave the best tonal quality for the instrument and the positions which gave the best balance between the room and the instrument itself.
Yeah.
But if you're in a recording studio, you have the facilities of introducing other reflective surfaces to the instrument if you wish, to the room if you wish. And also you have the possibility of introducing artificial reverberation.
Yeah, we talked about that. Well, it was quite a shock for me actually to hear that you've done so many recordings, not only about on pop and rock music, but also classical music and big orchestras, and you've taught me that it is a normal practice to add reverberation artificially.
It is, because it's the same problem that in many cases, if you make it depends on the attitude of the producer, but in many cases, if you make a recording with just a few microphones at some distance from the orchestra, there's a problem often in picking up noises from the audience, or depending on the concert hall, noises from outside. And some producers in particular like to adjust the dynamics of the orchestra. Maybe the violins could be a little bit louder in this section, or maybe the flutes could be a little bit lower in that section. And you cannot do that once you've recorded it from a point in the distant from the orchestra.
Yeah.
Whereas, I say, you may also be picking up other extraneous noises. So it's quite common to record orchestras with a greater number of microphones closer to each section of instruments. This way you can adjust the balance, because every performance isn't exactly the way that maybe even the conductor would have wanted it. Maybe the conductor wants to tell the violins, play a little bit higher, but the violins don't respond.
Yeah.
So if you have microphones on individual sections, you can lift the violins, but when you've got the microphones closer in, you're not getting as much of the characteristic of the whole. So it's quite normal to add either distant microphones in the hall, or to add artificial reverberation.
Yeah.
It's all a compromise. So you're trying to make a record. A recording isn't a scientific thing. A recording is something where you're trying to capture the best performance and make the recording as enjoyable as you can do for the people who are listening to it. And in many cases, when you capture the best performance, you're not always in the optimum circumstances for making the most technically accurate recording. But is there any point in making a technically accurate recording of a performance that is not as good as it could be?
Yeah.
So if you capture a fantastic performance, if you can enhance it artificially to gain more of the sensation of being back in the room, then it's the logical thing to do. You're trying to make something for people to enjoy. You're not trying to make something for people to analyze.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and we've opened a lot of topics to talk about. But one of the things you were mentioning when we did the test recording the day before yesterday of the clavichords, that it actually was difficult to have an idea what the sound would be without the room here, our own room, adding again to the sound of the loudspeakers, and that the first recording we made, and I maybe can share some on this video, but that the first recording was as if you were placing the instrument in the new room, in the new listening room, because we had very close miking, rather close miking, and that was interesting because I often hear the complaint or the wish actually that an instrument, an acoustical instrument, and certainly in the classical music I think you have this idea that the instrument should sound, that the sound reproduction should be as close to the real experience in real life, that the clavichord or the piano or the violin
but the
should
experience
sound.
in real life is different in every room. There is no definitive sound of any instrument.
So you're saying basically that that's something you should not want to achieve in the first place, that you listen in a different room to an instrument and that it sounds exactly like, if that would be possible, like it sounds in real life.
It's not possible because microphones don't capture sound in the way that the ears do. And this is one reason why even if you listen around an instrument and you try to find the place where the sound is the way you think you want it, if you put microphones exactly at the point where it sounds the best to your ears, it's quite possibly not the best place to put the microphones in order to be able to reproduce them through loudspeakers and get the best sound or the sound that you most want. Because the way that the ears and the brain process sound are completely different. When a microphone captures sound, it captures sound through two little points in space, that all they do is they sense the pressure at those 2 points in space. Whereas the ears have the pinnae on the outside. They're very directional and they're individual to each one of them. Because of the difference in our pinnae, we pick up the sound in different ways, each individual one of us. And I remember some tests that we were doing many years ago in London, trying to record some instruments. A cello, in fact, was the instrument initially, and trying to adjust the loudspeakers in the control room to have the best tonal balance, to have the most, so that when you went into the studio and listened to the cello, and you went back into the control room and listened to it through the loudspeakers, to adjust the equalization to give the most natural frequency balance from high frequencies to low frequencies. And there was a big difference between 3 different engineers in the room in their decision of how much high frequencies to use. Because some of the engineers would listen in the studio, go back into the control room, listen through the microphones and adjust the tone controls, the equalization, so that they thought, yes, this has the correct balance of, it sounds most natural compared with listening directly. But other engineers, the other 2 engineers, wanted a different amount of high frequencies. And this wasn't anything to do with their sensitivity of their ears, because they were the same ears that they were listening to the cello in the studio, that they were listening to it through the loudspeakers. It was simply that the way that the pinnae capture the sound field coming off the instrument, was different for each one of them. And when you put that sound back through 2 points, 2 little high frequency loudspeakers, the 3 people captured the sound in a different way when it was coming from 2 points than they did when they were standing in front of the instrument, where there was a diffuse sound coming off the instrument. So even then, we cannot really say what is the correct balance, because we hear differently. As soon as you go through a microphone and through loudspeakers, you've changed the circumstances completely in the way that we hear it. So it's all about a compromise. And it's all about trying to make a recording that people can enjoy. That's the job of the recording engineers and producers. It's still a very artistic function. It's not a scientific function that you can somehow analyze it and say this is the most accurate recording, because nobody can say what is the accurate sound of the instrument. It changes in every room.
Yeah, and with every
And
position.
and the instruments were never designed to be played in an anechoic chamber or outside.
Yeah.
So you can't use that as a reference,
No.
because the instrument was never played. So there isn't any. It's got to sound nice. It's got
Yeah.
to sound, to have the right dynamics, the right emotion, the right feeling. There's no technical precision to it. It's an artistic decision.
Well, let's be happy that there is not, because it's more interesting and more. Going back to this to the neutral room, or we talked about it in Vigo, and we have done some videos about this. That you've said that the neutral room is actually the point of departure for the recording studio, but that's not the same. And maybe you can explain that again. It's not the same as a dead room. I mean, it feels much.
A dead room is the same as playing outside on the lawn, or on a beach or somewhere. There is no sensation of any room or any reflection.
So what are you doing in a neutral room? Actually,
a neutral room is a room which has a certain amount of life to it, but the life in the room is subservient to the sound of the instrument.
Yeah.
The sound of the room will not dominate the instrument. It'll enrich it to some degree, but it will never dominate the instrument. And when you have a room like this, it allows you to position microphones where they can capture the overall characteristic of the instrument without suffering the problem that we suffered in this room, that when you get to a certain distance back, the microphone's actually capturing more of the sound of the room than it is of the instrument, so you lose the dynamics of the instrument.
Yeah.
The reverberation of the room is filling in the peaks and the troughs of the dynamics. You lose lose some of the expression. So a neutral room is a room in which you have much more flexibility of choice in the decisions about where to put the microphones and how to capture the sound of the room, the sound of the instrument.
Yeah.
And there is no fixed position on microphones either, because drums, for example, we've made recordings where two different drummers have been using one drum kit, sometimes for different styles of music. Maybe on one album, that for a certain style of music the artist has asked for one drummer, and for another type of music another drummer. And there'd be no possibility of finding the sound and then leaving it for both drums, because when another drummer plays in a different way, then the appropriate position of the drum of the drum to the microphone is different. So you may choose to use different microphones on the same drum kit in the same room, because this more suit the style of different drummers.
I understand, and actually you could say that this neutral room, this basic room, is actually specially designed for the ears of the microphone.
Exactly.
Which have no brain to correct any reflections.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then the possibility of adding wood paneling or other kind of stuff to enhance the life.
This
feeling.
gives you even more flexibility. So once you've got the sound that you want, you can then make different surfaces appear in the room at different places, so that you can try. But then, of course, if you're monitoring this in the control room, if the introduction of these surfaces into the room make changes that you don't want, then you're aware of it, and so you can. But you can only do this when you're listening on neutral loudspeakers in a control room.
Well, now we hit the next topic. That's the control room, and I mentioned I'm not a professional recording engineer, obviously, but I learned from your book and from you that the control room is really the center of the whole recording process. Since there you can be able to listen really what you've recorded, and maybe you can tell a little bit about that. And also, you read often today that these big loudspeakers that we've seen in Vigo in the recording studio where you have designed, that there is a kind of, I don't say discussion, but there's also a kind, you read sometimes that there are people saying you don't need them, you need the near fields or the headphones, and
no, headphones are useless in terms of monitoring sound if you're going to try to judge how the sound is going to reproduce via loudspeakers.
Okay.
The perception is totally different. There's no stereo soundstage in front of you in headphones. It's all across or inside the head. It's a totally different perception. The other thing about headphones is there is no international standard about the response of headphones.
Okay.
There is no standard about the free. Okay, with loudspeakers, it's normal to try to get the response on axis as flat as possible, and then for reproduction in normal rooms to have a good wide directivity so that the even frequency response is also spread out in many directions. But there is no such standard characteristic to which headphones are designed, because they're stuck onto our ears.
Yeah,
and there's
obviously
arguments whether they should be open headphones or closed headphones, or there is no standard. Headphones are only made to sound nice. So which are the reference headphones? There are no reference headphones, and they don't relate to listening to the recording on loudspeakers because there's no front stereo soundstage.
Yeah.
So you have to monitor on loudspeakers, and there's also no tactile sensation from headphones as well. You don't feel the low frequencies.
Yeah.
There's none of that with headphones. It's a totally different world. And in terms of whether you use big loudspeakers or small loudspeakers, you need big loudspeakers if you want to reproduce the sound at realistic levels. If you want to hear in the control room the sound of a grand piano, a concert grand, at a natural level, you need large loudspeakers. You just can't do it through small loudspeakers.
Okay.
And you need the frequency range that covers the full frequency range of the piano. This is what monitoring is. You're monitoring what is on the recording. You're not trying to make something sound right. At the point of recording, you want to know, have I got any noises? Have I got any distortion? Have I got the right tonal balance? Am I picking up the right characteristics? Is something on the piano squeaking? You don't want somebody to notice all these things only when they've bought the music and they're listening to it at home.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, and even when you're in the control room, you're in a different frame of mind. You're not sat there relaxed listening like you are at home. You're concentrating on the sound. You hear it in a different way. You need to hear different things because you're working in a more analytical manner. You're doing a quality control job. You're not sitting in the control room to just listen to thinking how wonderful this music is. You have a job to do. And there's a lot of concentration.
You often see, and certainly with me and my colleagues, we like to go to nice sounding rooms, historical rooms, but I've not done so many recordings, but it's often been done that recordings on location they don't have a control room, and in the best case I've seen some near field monitors placed in a room with much concrete and much reverberation and much reflection, but often you see control.
No, as I explained,
headphones.
A lot of these are compromises. If you're going to record in circumstances like that, you need engineers that got a lot of experience, who can guess probably where the best positions of the microphones are, who is listening on headphones for noises, background noises, or noises from the instruments, or squeaking chairs in the musicians as they're moving. This is all you can really monitor if you haven't got the conditions.
Yeah, that's true, but then you need very experienced people, as you say, and I have the feeling, but you have to correct if I'm wrong, that this whole hi-fi quality recording, like you're talking about, where the control room is the center and you have engineers who are used to work there and just go on location occasionally if they don't have a large mobile truck as you had in the past. But that's kind of disappearing, actually. Or
It's disappearing because there is no money left in the industry to pay people to specialise. The people that did the location recordings outside of the studios were normally people who specialised in this type of work.
It's only the matter of money, because if I be honest with myself, I mean, I made the recording in France, the organ recording, back in 2008, and it was done the way I described. I mean, just a small setup, headphones, and we made the recording. And actually, I realize now that if this CD sounds okay, we were very lucky. But probably, if I would...
Yes, but if you're doing this professionally and people are paying a lot of money for the recording, you can't trust that luck will be with you. You're expected to arrive back at the studio wherever you are with a good recording that's usable.
So that's the reason why.
And so you only get this experience by recording a wide range of music in a wide range of different halls, different rooms.
Yeah.
And it's expensive to do this.
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there were professional teams, many professional teams who spent their whole working life doing this.
Yes.
And had a tremendous amount of experience. And it looks very easy when somebody has that amount of experience.
Yeah.
Because you don't see when you're watching them do it, you don't see all the decisions that they're having to make in their own heads about where the best compromises are.
Yeah, and today I hear many people actually talking about equipment and bits and bytes, and this is capable of doing that in high resolution, high definition. But in a sense,
there's not much point making a high resolution, high definition recording of microphones in the wrong place and an orchestra not playing well.
That's true.
It's not about the equipment.
But the focus is on the equipment so much, and I have the impression that the industry is telling to people, well, just buy our equipment.
Yeah, of course it is. It's completely led by marketing.
So
you see, you still listen to some recordings that were made 30 or 40 years ago, and you say what wonderful recordings they are.
Yeah, certainly.
But the very fact they were made 30, 40 years ago means that they were made on recording equipment that of very limited capability compared with what we have now. But you're still saying that these are some of the best recordings. So the recording quality was not dependent on the equipment. It was dependent on experienced people knowing how to do it. Because a very simple recording equipment of today is capable of much better recorded quality than the best equipment that we had 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But the crucial point was not the absolute fidelity of the equipment. The things that were most important were knowing how to do it.
Yeah, that's with photography, the same thing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, Philip, about equipment and all that, we could talk about this for days, as long as we did last days. It was very intense. I would like to close and come back to our project here, our studio project. So we visited some properties. We agreed, I think, and Anya and I also, that beginning rather small, that's very relative. Here in the barn would be the best option for us. So do you think that we have here the possibilities of building a very good, professional, nice sounding recording studio?
Yes, certainly, and in a very nice environment as well. A very relaxing environment with the farms and the fields all around, and I think it's a good place to put musicians in the right frame of mind for recording.
Then I'm looking forward to working with you and everybody is involved in the project to continue. And as we said yesterday, we have to we go step by step, and the coming months will tell us a lot about possibilities and things we can or can't do. And so there will be a next chapter to this, I hope.
I hope so.
I thank you for your time for this interview.
You're welcome.
So that was the interview with Philip Newell. There's not too much that can be found on his person and his views. He's has written rather famous books, but I think this is one of the few, if not the only online interview that you can see. So I'm very excited that I can share this with you. I'm also very pleased that Philip really enjoyed his stay here, and from the 3 properties we visited, that he really thought that the property we own here, the barn, is the best suited for the recording studio and is also best suited for the plans we have in our mind. So we had, as I said, long conversations. We made up a very concrete to-do list. So the construction of the studio is very much in my head. So for Anja and myself, there is a lot of work to be done the coming months. Collect information, collect other people to join the team. And at the end, of course, it's a financial decision as well. So we have to come to figures and numbers. And if things goes well, then we head for very exciting months to come. All to be shared, of course, on this channel in the studio projects. As always, if you like this show, this series of vlogs, the channel, please hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. We see each other very soon again. Thank you for watching and goodbye.